Marine Biology Module 11 on coral reefs. This is a favorite chapter, right? We gotta all love the coral reefs. And actually, I have a game on coral reefs. That's all the better, right? Okay, so I'm going to go through my notes. I will post my notes for you without blanks. I'm going to talk through them a little. I just read the chapter and wrote the notes. And then you're also going to read the chapter because, as you know, these chapters have a lot of information. And so I tried to pull out what I thought was the most important and kind of the key points. But as you read it with the notes, that should help you a little to get a little more out of it. Okay. Sorry. That may happen a lot. Generally, they are found on the continental shelf. So remember when we have the ocean, they're not going to be found in the deepest part of the ocean. They're going to be found mostly. There's an exception to that actually, but we'll explain why. Generally, they're found on the continental shelf, but they're not found in every part of the continental shelf around the world. So if you've ever been to the beach in California or like Georgia, whatever, there's not, even most of the Florida beaches, there's not coral reefs right there. Down in the Keys, there is a coral reef growing down that area. They're found in tropical climates of the world. So again, that's why you're not going to find, you're not going to Maine and finding a coral reef, even though it's right there on the ocean. I thought I had something on me, but it's on my phone. Okay. Sorry. They're found in the tropical climates because they need warm temperatures to survive. So the requirements for coral reefs: they need warm temperatures, a hard surface for the larvae to settle on, shallow and clear water because they need light to penetrate. That light is necessary for the zooxanthelle to be able to live. So for it to do photosynthesis, although it's interesting that's a zoo and does photosynthesis, but it's okay. It does. And because it is in symbiosis with the coral, and we're going to talk about that symbiosis several times throughout the chapter it's mentioned. So it's super important. Hold on a second. If it is too hot, then what will happen is the coral will do what's called bleaching. Now if you've ever bleached your clothes accidentally and you pour bleach into a load that is not supposed to have bleach, it will come out with like white splotches all over it. Okay, if you've never done that, don't do it. It's not advisable. But so that's bleaching. You take color out of something, right? So you only use bleach on whites because it takes everything out. The coral, if it gets too hot, the coral will expel the zooxanthelle, which makes the coral appear white because the zooxanthelles have quite a bit of color in them, or it makes them at least, they're like a brown dark, so that makes them at least look a lot lighter. Different strains and species of zooxanthelle, I spelled it differently there, sorry, can be used depending on the temperature. So if it's like a warmer temperature, it might be one species. And then if the water changes temperatures, the coral can actually get rid of the zooxanthelle and bring in a different species of zooxanthelle that is good in that temperature will come and work with the coral. Okay, so coral composition. We have two things. We have reef builders and reef inhabitants. So reef builders are organisms that provide the structure to the reef and actually makes it look like a coral reef. They grow calcium carbonate armor around the bodies. So coral, zooxanthelle, coralline algae. They'll actually provide a structure. The reef inhabitants are everything else. Again, I really don't love the way the book arranged this stuff because it says something and then it goes on its tangents. So even here, you'll notice I put a box because I thought it was really tangential. Okay, forming the coral reef. So we talked first about the coral reef taxonomy. I'm sorry, not anatomy, taxonomy. So they're phylum Cnidaria, class Anthosa, and then there's two subclasses. So it's kingdom, phylum, class, order. So between class and order, there's subclasses. Remember, taxonomy is all made up by scientists in order for us to categorize things to make sense. So it's kind of like if you go to Walmart, they organize, actually, better example. You go to Aldi, they organize your food in what is, in their minds, a logical situation. Then they decide that they should organize it in a different logical in their brains, but now it's not logical in my brain. Okay, that's because they're rearranging my story. Bonus points for you for knowing that. Okay, so anyway, so it's a random way to I shouldn't say taxonomy is random. It's not random, but there's not just one right way to do it. You could take the same group of organisms and divide them differently. And the more we learn about organisms, the more they start to want to change how they're divided and how they're classified. That's why now we have a subclass, because they don't want to completely rewrite everything, reinvent it all. So now they have a subclass. And actually, as they're getting into genetics, that's actually even making it more complicated with the taxonomy, because now it's like, well, if these things are more genetically close, should we put them in a closer group rather than just how they look or how they act? Okay, so there's two subclasses. The Octocorale and Hexacorale zoantherian. So most of this chapter is going to focus on that second subclass, the hexacoralline and zoantherian. And that's the stony corals, sea anemones, the hard corals. The first subclass, Octocorale, is soft corals, and there's only a little bit of that. It's kind of discussed at the end of the chapter. Okay, coral anatomy. If you look on your book on page 331, there is a picture there. Okay, so they have a couple different life stages. They do have a larval stage, which often is a medusa stage. Looks more like a jellyfish, but they have a larval stage of some sort. A lot of these are just more plankton larval stages, meaning they're just kind of floating around. And then they have a polyp stage, which is where they are sitting in, and they kind of point up. So we're going to be looking at the end of their life cycle, the polyp stage there. They have tentacles with nematocysts. Remember, nematocysts are stinging cells. The tentacles can capture food and carry it to the mouth or gut. It can be a single polyp or different polyps, which would be a single animal with multiple mouths. The polyps sit in a corallite, which is a calcium skeleton. And then they're connected by this conosarc to connect one polyp to the other. Septae are the sharp ridges radiating from the center of a corallite cup. So you have this corallite cup, and they have septae that kind of stick up. And that provides, I'm guessing it provides a little structure. I don't think it actually says what the point of it is. Yeah, it doesn't say. No, it tells you what coral group they belong to, but it doesn't say the point, but that would kind of seem like maybe it helps to keep it sticking up. There's also columella, which are central projections from the floor of the corallite cup. So the columella, I'll get it, come down, and the septae point up. Okay, so how does a reef grow? It says they grow by 2 ways, and then it gives like 4. Okay. So the first one is pushing up from the corallite cup, and then it secretes new. So here's your polyp. It actually comes up, and then right here, in the middle space here, it grows more stuff. It also can grow sideways by budding, where it just kind of sends off a new piece. Some grow new corallites in the middle of the conosarcs between the polyps. So if you look at your picture between those polyps, they can grow new ones there. And some lengthen existing polyps by adding extra mouths, and that's how you create the brain pattern that you've seen in corals. Reproduction. They can reproduce both sexually and asexually. They basically, for sexually, can just throw their gametes in the water, and it used the example of thinking of a flower that would throw out pollen, which makes sense, right? We can just take these gametes, we'll throw them out into the water, and they will then form. They do go through metamorphosis. You have plankton. Remember, plankton just means it's floating through the water. That's all the word plankton means. Planola larvae, they can settle on a hard substrate and transform into that polyp shape. Then a single polyp can quickly form into like a whole little colony. Each colony has its own nervous system and an interconnected gastrovascular cavity. Okay. So each colony is one nervous system and basically one gut. And all these mouths that are pulling into. Coral growth forms. So there's 3 types of coral growth forms. Encrusting and boulder corals bud sideways and uniformly upward. Branching corals, vertically budding polyps. They go vertically. Fallacious corals go horizontal or vertically. Coral nutrition. Zooxanthellae provide carbohydrates. We talked about the zooxanthellae that are super important because if they're gone, the corals lose their color. They also provide nutrients to the coral, and they provide the carbohydrates that the corals need. So that's one. They can capture zooplankton and detritus. That's like the leftover stuff for food. Those provide protein. They can use their tentacles to capture food. They also can secrete a mucus to capture zooplankton, bacteria, and detritus. And they have these long filaments in their guts that can come out and go get food and absorb it into their stomach. So lots of ways, and they are growing a lot, so they need to, and we'll learn about how they really are kind of like in a desert. There's just not a lot of things around, so they need to have lots of ways to get food. Okay, 3 types of coral reefs, and this is where I said that not all of them are on the continental shelf. So we have fringing reef. Sorry. Is a type of coral reef that forms as a border along the coast. It is the most common. It's most likely affected by sediments and runoff. So if you look in your book for each of these, there's going to be a picture. So this is on page 337. 337. There's a picture, and basically it's a reef flat, and you can tell it's on the continental shelf because of the shape. It'll be easier if I just show you. Because of the shape, you can tell it's on the continental shelf. So you have your reef flat, your reef crest, slope, and then just rubble down here. So it's just growing right in here. Okay, then you have a barrier reef. This occurs a little distance out, and between the shoreline and the reef is a lagoon. So it's separated by a lagoon. So it basically has the same thing. There's just an additional back reef slope here. Oh, you can't see. There's an additional back reef slope before you get to the top of the flat reef. Or the reef flat. The reef flat. And then the third type is called an atoll. Now, an atoll is out kind of in the middle of either the Pacific or Indian Oceans. That's where they're found. They're deep in the ocean. And so you go, well, if they're deep in the ocean, how are they forming? We said they had to be close to the edge to have shallow, clear water in order to have photosynthesis, to have growth. They are, hold on, let me rephrase this. Yeah. So these atolls are a ring of coral reef enclosing a shallow lagoon. So they're going to be enclosing this lagoon that's going to be shallow and get photosynthesis, get enough light to perform photosynthesis. They are growing on top of extinct volcanoes. So they can build quickly because the heat from the volcano or ocean debris like a ship or things like that have fallen, they can grow on top of those. So they're not growing from the very bottom of the ocean. They're growing from basically underwater volcanoes that no longer are active. Um, and you can look, and again, it's very similar. There's a lot of discussion in here about trying to figure out how they grew and where they grew and how they could grow this quickly and things. There's a lot of discussion about that, but I'm not going to go into all the details. You can read through the discussion of that. But basically, the rates change based on conditions. Okay, coral reef ecology. Coral reefs basically are an area with a desert because there's very little plankton. So, in a desert, you have very little food available. Same kind of thing here with. Now, it does talk about it being equivalent to a rainforest because there's lots of organisms that live there. Where does it talk about it being a desert? Okay. So, but they do have lots of organisms that live there, but it's not necessarily easy to get the food. So zooxanthellae provide nutrients, but also they provide the carbohydrates they need. They also recycle nitrogen and phosphorus back into the coral because remember, we have to have the nitrogen. Everything has to be cycled back through the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, so our phosphorus cycle. Like all these nutrients have to cycle back through. It can also make its own nitrogen that it can use through the cyanobacteria that are in the coral reef. And it can use waste from the fish that are in the coral reef. So there's lots of good ways to recycle all the nutrients back through. So remember in ecology, we're talking about all the nutrients being cycled around. Okay, reef relationships. So the coral reefs will fight for space. So those tiny filaments I said can come from the gut and go get prey? They can also attack their neighbors, their neighbor coral with it, which I thought was kind of fun. Like, they can go attack their neighbors. And they have stinging tentacles that can injure adjacent colonies. Or they can just grow really, really fast and take over an area. So when the corals are fighting for space, they can even attack each other. Soft corals can grow quicker than hard corals and can even move a little bit. Even though they're sessile, they can move a little. And also, as far as keeping the reef going, the reef fish eat parts of the polyp, but not the whole thing. So it's easy to regrow because it's just eating like little parts. But think of like eating like part of a leaf versus eating the entire plant. Okay, and then it talks about a few of the symbiotic relationships, which there's quite a few. I actually did a quick search. There's a lot of neat videos if you want to go watch videos on symbiotic relationships or see the coral reef in action. There's a lot. I'm not going to link any because there's like a bunch and I don't want to go watch them all individually. But there's a lot you could watch on them. The remoras are mutualistic with sharks. The remoras eat scraps. I think I spelled scraps wrong. I did spell scraps wrong. From the shark and remove parasites. So they're mutualistic that way. Clownfish and sea anemone, we all know that one. Clownfish get protection, sea anemone get food. There's these cleaner shrimp, and so what they do is, this is hilarious, they go to the edge of the colony and they do a little dance to attract large predator animals. But those predator animals, when they see the shrimp little dance, they are docile because they're coming to let the shrimp clean out their mouth. So instead of coming aggressively into the coral reef, they come very docilely because these shrimp are at the edge doing a dance, and the shrimp clean their teeth, and then the predator animals will go on their way without hurting the coral. That one I thought was fun. Mostly because the cleaner shrimp do a little dance. And then we have symbiotic crab, shrimp, and fish that will fight off crown of thorns. So the crown of thorns want to come and eat the coral. But the crab, shrimp, and fish will actually fight off this crown of thorns for the coral. Okay, so that is the basics of chapter 11. And like I said, you will read through it and then answer the questions. And let me know if you have questions.